How many people have learned, we've learned many things when we go to school. We've learned how to ride a bike, we've learned how to read a book, we've learned how to do this and how to do that. But how many people have been taught the proper way of breathing? Today's topic, unlike the last one where I mentioned one of the most expensive spices available to mankind in the form of saffron.
A very effective spice.
A very, very effective spice indeed. And you don't need too much of it to get the desired effect. But today's topic is completely free of charge. You don't have to buy any lemons or limes or spices or manuka honey or any of that stuff. It's all around you. It's the air we breathe. Unfortunately, in some parts of the world, like northeast Pakistan and India, there have been a lot of smog going around, so I wouldn't recommend doing these breathing exercises I'm about to discuss there. But if you are in a country where there is air, then you can certainly benefit tremendously from this particular episode. So the topic of the medicine of the Mahdis today is the art of breathing and how you can benefit from certain type of breathing techniques. Now, the word for breath is something that is very interesting and already has religious connotations. So the word spirit, Alia, comes from the Latin word spiritus, which comes from the verb spiritare, I believe it is, and this means to breathe.
Wow, interesting.
Yes, and even more interestingly, the word for breath in Sanskrit is Atman. And I was one of those people who learned German growing up, and the word to breathe in German is also Atman. That's why they say it's a Indic language, German in some ways. So it has all of these references to it, and of course it says, we breathed into Adam of our spirit, and it was then that Adam truly became alive. So breathing is a practice that is not only connected with spiritual health, but it also has a lot of physical health benefits. And the proper way of breathing is what we're going to discuss today. The first thing, I think, when you were talking about breathing, and I just wanted to mention some spiritual benefits of it, is if you are interested in learning certain types of breathing to really focus your mind upon things like meditation, and we spoke about different ways that meditation can happen, is to really anchor down through your breathing. And I think that all of basically the entirety of the religion or religions of the East in Hinduism and Buddhism, and of course the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, go even if to China to learn and gain knowledge. And these are from the Eastern faiths. They go into a great deal of depth discussing this aspect of spirituality, where through breathing you can create this synchronicity in your thinking, where you have this ordered brainwave patterns. You can affect your blood pressure, you can affect the rhythm of your heart even through different breathing techniques. The first thing we associate with breathing is energy. So when you look at somebody who is stressed, who is depressed, who is anxious, you'll notice that most of the time they have very shallow breathing, and they usually breathe through their mouth because it is a response to try to get as much oxygen into the system. But these shallow, quick breaths that they take doesn't oxygenate the lungs. The lungs actually, if you were to take them out of the thoracic cavity and unfold them, you would find that they have a surface area, if you were to make it completely flat, about 100 meters squared. That is how much volume your lungs have. And when you take shallow breaths, especially in through the mouth, you do not benefit from the oxygen in the environment that you need to feed every single organ and cell in your body. So the first thing about breathing that everybody should know is that when you breathe, when you inhale, you should be breathing basically all the time, as much as possible, through your nose. This is where you breathe from. And nasal breathing has so many advantages. Not only does it moisten and filter the air you breathe from microbes, because our noses have these fine hair filters in them that take away dust and bacteria and other particles that can go into our lungs and irritate it, it actually acts as a filtering mechanism. It moistens the air. The nose, when you breathe through your nose, it produces nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator, which makes breathing more efficient and the circulation better as well. Nasal breathing and the absence of it has been responsible for changing people's facial structures. It causes elongation of their mouth. It can cause lots of serious medical problems if done in the long term without getting it treated. Some people have, for example, polyps in their noses, things that are blocking their ability to breathe nasally, and they become much more susceptible to infections because that filtration mechanism is no longer available to them. So breathing through the nose is the first thing that everybody should discipline themselves to do. And of course, when we look at the traditional depiction of people who are not considered to be the smartest, they call them slack-jawed, and you see them mouth breathing, and that's the way they're often depicted in kind of mainstream culture, right? So mouth breathing is not good. The next thing you have to do is you have to take a deep, what we call diaphragmatic breath. A diaphragmatic breath, your diaphragm is basically a tough muscle that runs under your rib cage, and it is what pulls the lungs, the air into the lungs. Now, I said the lungs have a vast surface area, and most of that oxygen is actually at the base of the lungs. So if you imagine your lung is like a cone shape, and most of the tissue that is involved in gas exchange is in the lower half of the lungs. So to pull that air into the lower half of the lungs, you have to take what we call a diaphragmatic breath. And the best way I can describe this to people is to imagine a baby breathing. You know, babies, when they breathe and you see them, you see their stomach moving up and down. And this is because they are actually breathing with their diaphragm. And a great way to get into the habit of breathing as much as possible through the diaphragm, and I know this is not always possible, sometimes when you have a busy job and you're going around from place to place, but when you get that moment, that few minutes, really focus on making it a diaphragmatic breath, and I'll explain the advantages that come with it in addition to increasing oxygenation. If you put your hand right here at the base of your rib cage, and then move it slightly further down towards your belly button, and then breathe, you should be able to feel your belly coming out slightly, and this is caused by the pull of the diaphragm. And as the diaphragm gets pulled down, it pushes the belly slightly forward, and this is a diaphragmatic breath. Diaphragmatic breathing is actually it's a great way to boost up your immune system. And this is the second major benefit. So we talked about energy and increasing oxygenation. Oxygen, of course, is vital for the metabolism and running of our bodies. But it is a very potent immune system booster if you breathe properly. When you are breathing diaphragmatically and you are taking in a breath and holding it for a few seconds and slowly exhaling, this actually stimulates the lymphatic system in your body. Now, we all know that we have a heart. The heart has these vessels coming out of it that circulate blood around the body. It takes the oxygenated blood and gives it to the organs, and it takes the bad blood or deoxygenated blood from the veins back to the heart, and the loop continues. What people don't know is an equally extensive system of vessels runs through the body, and this is our drainage system, and it's called the lymphatics. So the lymphatics basically take away all of the excess stuff out of the body and give it back. So all the extra fluid that we have, the proteins that we have, are produced in the lymphatics and then returned to the circulation through what we call the subclavian vein, which is right here under the shoulder, under the collarbone rather. This extensive system of vessels, unlike the circulation, does not have a pump. Now, when we're walking and we're running, our heart is pumping. It is beating this fluid around. But what causes that fluid in the lymphatics to move? It is diaphragmatic breathing.
Wow.
And imagine all that drainage system becoming clogged, but when you move your muscles and you have diaphragmatic breathing, it actually creates this mechanism where it starts to circulate. And this is where the lymph nodes are, of course, something you've heard of. The lymph nodes are present typically in your neck. When we have a sore throat, we can feel these lumps. This is where the white cells of the body, the leukocytes, congregate and kill infections. So if you've got a smooth flow through them, you are much more likely to kill these microorganisms that can cause ill health and infections in the body. The lymph system needs to be running smoothly. If it is like a sludge, it is stagnant, like a stagnant pond, it will produce more microbes and more infections. So that is another big advantage. Along with muscular activity in the legs where your blood pools up, you can take deep diaphragmatic breaths. There are many people advising different types of ratios. You should inspire for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, breathe out for 8 seconds. This is one that's been studied to show that it stimulates the lymphatic system. But to be honest with you, it's very simple. The idea is to slow down the breathing, to breathe in through your nose, to breathe deep from your diaphragm, and to expire slowly. And this will serve that dual purpose of oxygenating your lungs fully and also getting that lymph system going that keeps you in good immune health. The next part is, of course, the relaxation aspect of breathing. Like I said, when you have somebody who's anxious, and by the way, when somebody has a panic attack, how do they breathe? I can demonstrate it for you. I've seen it many, many times. They're breathing, their mouth breathing. They're shallow, rapid breaths. There's no oxygenation going in. They're anxious and they're stressed, and you've seen this always. They get this bag and they then blow into this bag to calm themselves down so that their breathing slows down. This actually promotes the production of stress hormones, and it's a vicious cycle. The breathing stimulates the stress hormones, which stimulates the breathing, the wrong kind of breathing, and the problem actually gets aggravated. What you want to do is you want to slow down that breathing. And there is one technique that I do wish to share with you and with our audience, that if you were to learn it, it has been proven that with just 3 breaths like this, you can take your stress hormones like cortisol down measurably. Now, this is interesting. 3 breaths in this way can take stress levels in your blood down. Imagine, in 3 breaths you can do this. What is this type of breath? It's called the physiological sigh. And what you do is, and imagine doing this before a meditation session, or doing this as you're about to unwind and get into bed. This is very simple, and I will demonstrate, and you can follow at home, and hopefully you'll benefit from it. So the idea is that you first empty your lungs completely. So you exhale. When the lungs are fully empty, with the nose, breathing always through the nose, you take a breath in, aiming to fill up about 90% of your lungs. And then, when you've done that, you take a little bit extra. And what that little bit extra does, we found, is that it actually, your lungs, if you zoom in on them, they're like a reverse tree. And at the end, instead of leaves, they have, which of course are what breathe in the trees, you have these things called alveoli, which are like air sacs.
These little round kind of formations?
Bubbles, exactly. Right. And they are where the gas exchange actually happens with the capillaries or the small blood vessels that penetrate the lungs. So what you do is you take a breath in that fills in 90% of your lung capacity, and everybody has a different lung capacity, and then you breathe in a little bit more extra. So this is, and then you exhale slowly back out through the nose. Some people say you can do it through the mouth, but I prefer, again, the nose to be the breathing apparatus here. So let's demonstrate what a physiological sigh is and how it can measurably reduce your stress hormones. So, empty out the lungs.
So you hold it a little bit and then you let it out.
Exactly, and not for long, just for maybe a few seconds. And again, I like to hold it a little bit longer. I find that it also oxygenates the blood more in this way, but you don't really need to hold it in. The idea is a slow filling up and a little bit extra, and then gradually expiring out.
Amazing.
And do 3 of these and your stress levels will fall. Breathing is the tool that was given to us by God to really promote health. And when we lose our ability to breathe, we lose the quality of our lives. One of the most ingenious satanic innovations or creations that I really believe the devil created is smoking, because it kind of hijacks this mechanism that gives us so much peace and tranquility, but it thereby introduces into the body tons and tons of harmful carcinogens and chemicals that actually destroy our body, creating cancer, heart disease, and stroke. And if you see somebody who's smoking, they're doing what they're really enjoying is that slow, deep breathing, which is actually giving them relaxation, but on the other flip side, they're pumping nicotine into their system, which is making their mind hyper. So it is really, really one of the most evil, ingenious creations, because it hijacks something that is for stress and then gives you more stress and cancer on top of that. So do not get rid of smoking. Now, of course, we have the vaping culture, which uses that same aspect of breathing to try and get these chemicals into the system. And just FYI, vaping is as damaging, if not more damaging, than tobacco smoking through cigarettes and cigars. The chemicals used in it are being studied extensively now, and slowly but surely we're beginning to unearth the fact that it has these chemicals that the body is incapable of breaking down, and it's creating these things, especially in its target audience, which is teenagers, creating this phenomenon of what they're calling popcorn lung, where the lung basically becomes crackly and hard rather than moist and malleable and pliable, and it creates huge problems. Children have been put into hospital, they've been on oxygen machines, and so on and so forth, and even ventilators in some cases. So
terrible.
Breathing is strengthening the immune system, it's combating stress, it's increasing energy, and it's getting you into that meditative practice. Do it, learn it, and hopefully benefit from it. And write to me and tell me if there are any breathing techniques that you've learned that have benefited you, and we can hopefully do another segment on the art of breathing.